open questions to the floor. You're welcome to pose your questions directly to our speakers, or feel free to jot them down to pass on to the stage. But let me start by asking both of our speakers first. What do you think are some of the strengths a female leader brings to what's arguably still a primarily male-dominated business world? What are some of the strengths women leaders bring? Who would like to go for this?
Well, I think most women are more empathetic. They're better listeners. And I think it's actually very important to listen, because when you listen, you're actually learning. But when you're speaking, you're just repeating what you know. So women tend to be more willing to ask questions and to cultivate self-development. And the fact that they are not pretending to know everything, they can actually create a much better teamwork-focused, collaborative environment. And in this world, I believe that a lot of success is built on strategic partnerships. So it's important that you try to connect all the dots and bring in all the resources to work towards a common goal. And I believe that women tend to be more mission-oriented and perhaps can communicate strategic goals better. So in an organization, it is very important that everyone is motivated to work towards a common larger goal, and that unites the team.
Do you agree, Diana?
Yes, indeed I do. And I think it's fair to say that men, women, I think we both have qualities that are strengths, that could be strengths to support different objectives. So for me, it's really how do you strike the right balance and to work in such a way that we play to our strength, men or women, people of different gender and ages. I think it's all a matter of how do you then achieve a common set of objectives. And women tend to be quite collaborative in most cases. So I think in that sense, I think it fosters that spirit of working towards common objectives. The core values need to be aligned, and together we progress.
You mentioned in your speech that that striking that balance between being assertive without being seen is difficult, especially women from Asian culture. How can they achieve this?
I think it's a long-term sort of social mindset that women, especially Asian ladies, tend to be seen as more, or are expected to be more polite. As I mentioned, to a certain extent, sometimes self-effacing and sort of soft-spoken. This day and age, I think the standards in the society, the culture actually facilitates and accepts that you need to be constructive, you need to be positive and factual when presenting or engaging, when presenting an idea, when engaging with people. I think as long as you stay to the subject, to stay on the subject, you approach any matter in a constructive, positive manner, I think you can pretty much overcome what has been quite set as a long-term social mindset, or the challenges associated with such. Yeah.
Do we have a question from the floor at the moment? If not, keep thinking. I will plow ahead with a question for Poman. So you started out in the hotel and hospitality industry before striking out on your own. Why did you decide to do this? And why this sector? Why technology and edutainment?
Well, it all began with a sense of mission. As I said, I actually studied psychology back in university, and I've always wanted to do something to make a positive difference to the next generation. At first, I thought I wanted to be a psychologist, but in Asia, actually, you don't go to see a shrink unless you are forced by your family or by the police. And so I believe prevention is better than cure. So if I were to pursue the research route, then perhaps the articles would just be seen by a few hundred people. If I were to be a psychologist or psychiatrist, I would be seeing 8 or 10 people a day. But by immersing myself in the business environment and also adopting technology, interactive media as a means to convey positive messages, then we can actually be reaching a much larger crowd and potentially even the world. And that is why I created Bodhi and Friends.
Okay. Question here. Now we talked about what are the strengths that women leaders bring. The question here is, what are some of the inherent weaknesses of women? Do we have that? Is there such a thing?
I think, yeah, again, I think men and women, we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. It's not so much specific weaknesses. I mean, we have our differences. Women go on maternity leave and a much more extended period than your paternity leave, for example. But I don't think that actually would or should be considered as obstacles or hurdles. I think it's really how we go about building a culture, encouraging people to be at their best, to be able to offer and achieve what they can potentially achieve. And as companies, I think we should, or entrepreneurs, I think we should foster that ability and culture with all sorts of different sort of policies and infrastructure of a company that you can set out, flexi hours, remote access, and extended leave for staff members, and allowing them to gradually, as I mentioned, come back after maternity leave. For HSBC, we also have childcare center for mums. We also have special care facilities for new mums if they need to breastfeed or something. So we do have an infrastructure to support all this. And as I mentioned, it's important we then encourage our staff members positively to take these on and foster a culture where it's widely accepted, is promoted, and positively engaging our staff members in that respect. Women should also then feel that, with proper support, you can go further, and you just have to then give it your best shot to do so. Yeah.
Now, HSBC in Hong Kong has seen some high-profile women rise through the ranks, including your predecessor, Lita Fong. Do you see this as a developing trend in the more traditional sectors, like in banking, especially?
Certainly. I think finance has traditionally been quite a male-dominated industry, sector. Certainly, we're seeing more women engaging in different levels of management. Ourselves, HSBC, we do believe in diversity and inclusion. We strongly promote that. In certain parts of our global operation where we're wanting to progress a bit faster because we've been behind for various reasons, we do actually have quotas or targets, if you would, to attain a certain level. And it's through time then we hope to achieve what the company sets out to do, a more diverse and inclusive management and staff culture. Yeah.
Question for you both. Who would you say is the person or persons who has influenced your leadership style?
Perhaps I can. Hello? Yeah, I just wanted to answer the weakness part first, because I think most of you would agree that women are just by nature more emotional. So I see that as a double-edged sword. It can be both a strength and a weakness. So we could be more emotionally expressive, but the fact that we are more in touch with our emotions also gives us greater intuition. And also, when there's passion, you can actually not suppress it, but transform it into a very strong energy, a force of energy within the company. And in terms of female role models, I'm actually Buddhist, but I see Mother Teresa as a very venerable female leader, because in India it is a society where there are many caste systems, and yet her compassion is able to melt through all the differences. And I think that is just a very good example of how actually the most powerful leaders do not lead with a sword, but with actions and words.
What about you, Dinah? Who would you?
I tend to like to observe and look at people around me and see, there are always two sides to a coin. So I agree with Poman. I think, where you have strengths, you have weaknesses. Where you have some positives, you have, areas you can improve on. Role models. I've been asked that question before, and I did answer that. Aung San Suu Kyi actually is top of list. But I myself am Catholic, and the Papal, actually the Pope, I think is truly inspirational. Yeah, and perhaps that is more of a yin yang, right? A female role model and a male role model.
Okay. Any questions from the floor? Anyone would like to pose a question for either? Right. One more question for each, perhaps. Same question for both of you. What advice would you give for women in leadership positions? What would be your advice to them?
My advice would be to embrace yourself. There is no reason why, when you find yourself in a high-ranking position, that you have to become a male. Because, as Diana says, yin-yang is actually the best balance. And 以柔制剛, you can actually conquer the greatest forces with a deeper force from within. And there is a difference between being assertive and aggressive. There's a difference between being confident and being egocentric. So I think actually women leaders, as we discussed just now, do have very unique qualities that can also help them unite the team and to be a very powerful, impactful, visionary leader.
And I would say also to follow your heart. We have a work life, we have our personal life, and whichever role we play in, I think this day and age we all play different roles under different circumstances. We just follow your heart and give it your best shot.
Actually, there is another question from the floor earlier. Quite general, asking how do you strike work-life balance? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it, for everyone, not just for women. But what is your secret to striking that balance?
I'll start first. I think that balance is different for different people. I wouldn't think of trying to strive work-life balance with actually doing something, because that's almost like you have an agenda for everything. For me, it's more about a perspective. When you're approaching a difficult circumstance at work or at different stages in life, I think it's all a matter of perspective, of how you turn things into a positive. If you can achieve that, then you have less stress, and then you have to do with less stress relief in a way. So I think it's starting from the origination and the perspective of your thoughts first. Poman is a dog lover, so am I. I also have 3 cats at home, so they're my great comfort, I would say.
My answer to that is to live to work rather than to work to live. So when you love your work, then there is no difference between working and your other parts of your life. Of course, you still want to be spending more time with your family and not just locking yourselves in the office. But I think the fact, if you do find your work so meaningful, then the hours that you spend on your work no longer count as work.
Actually, Poman, I understand that you've been a high achiever since at a very young age, and you know, you received your degree from Duke University at age 19. But you've been quoted as saying that when you transferred to you started your career, it was like being thrown in the deep end. What's that about? You know, after your
Again, it's 隔行如隔山 because you know, in the university or at school in general, you're in complete control. So whatever hard work you put in, you pretty much know the results. There are no factors beyond your control. Whereas in the workplace, in the business world, there are so many factors that are completely unexpected. So at first I was struggling with that. And also at first, when I first joined the business world, I thought that long-term profitability means taking advantage of your customers or making someone believe that, oh, my product is worth what it actually is. But as I said just now, long-term winning actually requires all parties to benefit and win.
Well, on that note, we'll conclude our Luncheon Dialogue. A big thanks to our speakers, Diana Cesar and Poman Lo, for being with us today.